This is English shorthand dictation number 119 and the dictation speed is 160 words per minute. Ready? Start. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership was signed in the month of November at a virtual meeting of member states on the margins of the annual East Asia Summit 8 years after the bloc was launched. The timing is neither surprising nor linked to any geopolitical development. It was announced during the East Asia Summit last year. India joined the negotiations in 2012 and continued to be part of them until the Bangkok meet. It was flexible in negotiations and made adjustments in pursuit of a comprehensive, fair and balanced agreement. In the end, the final document did not meet any of the three parameters. Firstly, it remained weak on services, especially in areas where India had a competitive advantage. But the breaking point was the absence of specific safeguards on imports from China. One circuit breaker was a steep rise in imports. Another parameter was that since Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership permits differential coverage of market access between countries, India wanted full assurance that China would not be able to take advantage of the higher coverage permitted to countries of Association of Southeast Asian Nations. India did not get this assurance. The third parameter was adequate protection on tariff increases it had instituted on some products since the negotiations commenced, partly to remove anomalies such as levies on inputs being higher than those on finished goods. There are also no guarantees that China will play by the rules. It did not do so as a member of World Trade Organization. India has found it hard to access Chinese markets in areas of its competitive advantage, despite this being routinely taken up at the highest levels. China has not stopped using coercive trade measures to express political displeasure against its partners in free trade agreements. India has started entering into free trade agreements and comprehensive economic partnership agreements a few years ago. Among the members of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, it has free trade agreements or comprehensive economic cooperation agreements with Singapore, Japan and Korea. Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership would have added China, Australia and New Zealand to the list, but it would have been a free trade agreement with China. However, India's domestic industry was not competitive enough to benefit from the existing free trade agreements. In any case, India's largest exports were going to countries with which it did not have free trade agreements. It is unlikely that India would have been able to withstand the import surge from China and damage to its industry in the short run had it signed Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. India's focus should first be on becoming industrially strong through a Make in India program. Many members of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership have reached this stage. An industrially weak and economically vulnerable India would have hardly been able to shape the region's rules despite arguments on the strategic merits of joining Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. After all, China did not become the world's biggest manufacturing power by entering into free trade agreements. Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is being touted as a triumph of multilateralism in an age of protectionism. But it is at best regionalism and it militates against multilateralism pursued through World Trade Organization. Free trade agreements did not prevent supply shocks and disruptions during the pandemic. Supply chain resilience, trust and efficiency have become more important these days and will influence trade. China is already the largest trading partner for most of the members of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That has not prevented friction among them, nor has it stopped countries from making strategic hedges. Japan and Australia joined the Malabar exercises. 35% of Australia's exports go to China, but China has just presented 14 grievances to Australia. On the eve of the signing of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, Japan and Australia signaled stronger defense ties. Australia has also become part of a trilateral agreement with India and France. Japan and China are close trading partners, but tensions between them remain high over China's territorial claims. Neither the existing free trade agreements nor Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership will stop China from trampling on Southeast Asian claimants in the South China Sea. The trade integration between the United States and China has not restrained the two countries from turning into strategic rivals. The European enthusiasm for China is waning, with the latter using its economic clout to divide Europe. to deepen trade and economic ties in the Indo-Pacific region and with current members of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. India does not need Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership as much as it needs to get its own house in order. For a start, it must make its industry innovative and competitive, its research and development on par with the best, its logistics and trade infrastructure efficient, its human resources skilled, its financial markets healthy and capable of low-cost finance, its administrative and legal systems responsive, and its taxation stable, competitive and predictable. This is the mission of Atmanirbhar Bharat. The Constituent Assembly of India aroused the vision of a new, vibrant, independent India in which true Swaraj would be realized not only by the nation but also by each individual. Independent India set out on a new path of framing democratic, modern constitution that would usher in political, social and economic democracy in India. A new era of political freedom and individual rights had just begun to guarantee a life of dignity for every citizen of this great nation, irrespective of his primordial linkages with caste, religion, language, or ethnicity. The preamble of the Constitution reflected the core constitutional values like liberty, justice, equality, and various freedoms. It also set the high ideals of a secular and democratic republic to be realized through the instrument of the Constitution. Thus, the Constitution was not just to be a legal document laying down the framework of governance, but an agent of social and economic revolution. The historical injustices were to be rectified by the positive interventions of the state. Thus, the noble goals of an egalitarian and just society became the prime pursuits of independent India. At the same time, the gigantic tasks of nation building offered great challenges given the reality of immense diversities which posed problems in welding together disparate interests and multiple identities. Fortunately, the leadership of independent India rose up to the task and set out the process of nation building by giving due recognition to different languages by linguistic reorganization of the states. Though Hindi was declared as the official language of the country, each state was free to choose its own official language. Thus, contrary to apprehensions about balkanization of India due to linguistic formation of states, India emerged a more consolidated nation. The task of nation building took into account both the individual identities of the Indians as well as their national identities. In other words, nation building helped in creating unity in diversity, which has been a historical fact of our cultural and political existence since ancient times. Another task that was taken up by the builders of modern India was the gigantic task of state building. This involved creating modern institutions of governance and more. A number of scientific institutions were founded to make progress in the frontier areas of science and technology. Today, we are proud of those institutions and establishments. Thanks to the great vision of our political leaders and scientific community, we have emerged as a self-reliant nation in science and technology and are leaders in space and IT sectors. Similarly, a robust foundation was laid for the security of the nation by creating a strong military capability. Utmost care was taken to ensure that our military remains under civilian control and never comes out of the barracks on its own. The foundation of a civilian regime was indeed a great achievement of independent India, because most Asian African nations which became independent from colonial rule witnessed military coup and dictatorship. More importantly, institutions of governance were created to provide effective good governance. An independent election commission, CAG, judiciary, a neutral civil service were the main institutions of governance created. Sardar Patel rightly felt that only the All India services would secure the unity and integrity of India. On the economic front, planned development was put on the top agenda towards the goal of inclusive growth. Abolition of zamindari system, land reforms, raising agricultural productivity by employing modern agricultural practices changed the face of rural India and made our country self-sufficient in food. Nehru built the heavy industries for rapid industrialization of India. On the external front, India espoused a value-based foreign policy which drew itself from our cultural values of peace and coexistence and was reflected during the national movement. Article 51 of the Directive Principles enshrines these values. India became a sane voice of peace during the Cold War, which threatened humanity. However, the needs of our security were also addressed while articulating our our value-based foreign policy and the nuclear option, and exercise of India's strategic autonomy expressed through Nehru's policy of non-alignment aided a realistic approach to conduct of India's interaction with the external world. On the social justice front, constitutional and statutory safeguards were provided for the vulnerable and the deprived. The Supreme Court has championed the cause of those who cannot seek justice on their own through a liberal view on public interest litigation. The failure of the executive and the legislative branches in delivering services and in protecting the poor and the needy has resulted in judicial activism or judicial outreach. With all allegations of acting beyond its defined boundaries, the Supreme Court has truly played the role of a catalyst and agent of social change by initiating social action to mitigate the suffering of the poor.